So next one, slope and rate of change. Those are the same thing. Slope and rate of change are the same. So those of you that are in science with me, we know that rate means speed, and so, or it can mean speed, right? And so if you want to figure out the speed of something, they're the same thing, right? If I want to figure out the speed of something, it's always a fraction, right? Like distance over time. Slope is y over x. So it's all the same thing. It's all a ratio. Okay?
Is slope the same thing as rate? If you're doing it in the sense of a graph, then it would be the exact same thing.
Yes. And a lot of the stuff we do is a slope on some level. Okay? All right. So first, slope. Slope is the slant or steepness of a line. So slant or steepness of a line. And we kind of mentioned that last class when I was talking about the slanting of the lines, making it parallel. Okay? And we're going to talk a little more about that too. Okay? So slant or steepness of a line. Next, rise. Last class I wrote down rise with a different letter. Rise, I spell it with a Y. So that you remember it is the vertical, it's on the y-axis. Okay, so I spell rise like that. Because y is always dealing with the rise. So the rise is the vertical change between 2 points. A lot of times that is written like this. Change in y. That's delta y. The triangle means the change. Okay, so the run is the horizontal change between 2 points. Okay, horizontal change, which sometimes is written as change in x. Okay, and then I've got another one that's labeled as slope, just because that is actually slope-intercept form, and that is that form that we used all last class. So we should be well versed with it, but we'll keep moving with it. So the slope of a line formula. Anybody remember the formula to find slope? That is correct. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? So that is something that needs to be in your head. Most of the time, you need to know that, okay? Another way that you can think of that is what I just wrote down on the previous slide. A lot of people write it like this. Change in y over the change in x. It's just how much changed on the y, right? We take the final minus the initial, okay? And then subtract the final minus the initial. That shows you how much it changed, okay? I rarely use this. That just might come up later for you guys. So I'm just putting it in your head so at least you can recognize it later. Okay, so there's our formula. Again, I might not be giving that to you, so we need to have it memorized, but we will use it enough where it should be memorized anyway. Lastly, remember it's rise over run. So that means the y's go on the top. The rise go on the top, and the run goes on the bottom. Okay, so if we're ever given 2 points, the first thing we want to do is do that. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, I know how to do.
Okay, so what do we have to do?
First you have to label.
That is true. Exactly right. First you have to label x1, y1, because that's the first point, and x2, y2. Okay, then we're going to plug those into our formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, the thing that makes mistakes on these problems is negatives, because there's already a minus in here, so sometimes you have minus a negative, which turns to a plus, and a lot of people for some reason just miss one of those and make it minus no matter what. Okay, so if I plug those in, my y2, my second y is negative 3, minus my first y, so y1 is 5, over my x2 is 2, minus my first x is a negative 1. When we plug in, if it's a negative, we put it in parentheses. Okay, so on the top, that is negative 3 minus 5 more. If you want a chunka, that is negative 8. On the bottom, chunka, that's 2 plus 1 is 3. So your slope on this would be negative 8 over 3. And again, we actually like fractions when it deals with slope. So that's fine to have. Slope is better when it's in a fraction because it's easier to use. Okay, so same thing here. I would highly advise labeling it every single time. X2, Y2. Another common mistake is, for some reason, people put X1, X2, Y1, Y2. Okay, it's always XY, then XY. Okay, plug those in and get to a slope for me. Alright, so I got this plugged in. 5 minus 11 gives you a negative 6 over 2 minus negative 4 is the same as 2 plus 4. That's a positive 6, and we do want to simplify, so negative 1. And I said slope is easier in a fraction, but if they just ask you for the slope, then go ahead and simplify it all the way. So don't type in negative 1 over 1 for this, but if we're using slope to create a graph, then you would want to change it to a fraction. So still simplify as much as you can. If you were putting it on a graph, and you graphed using this, negative 6 over 6, instead of negative 1 over 1, you'd still get the same line. You would just have to use a point that's further away. You'd have to go down 6 over 6 instead of down 1 over 1. Okay? So they can also give it to you in this way. A table. Okay? The main thing about a table is they give you more points than necessary. So you need to figure out which points to use. You need 2 points. I'm going to say always choose the easiest points. So if there's positives, choose those. If there's ones that include zeros, choose those. Okay? If there's just smaller numbers, choose those. Okay? Choose the ones that are easiest. The ones that they don't have to be next to each other. So if this one and this one were the easiest, those are the ones I would choose. Okay? Choose the easiest 2 points. I'm going to choose those bottom 2. So I'm going to circle those bottom 2. And those are the ones I'm going to choose. Okay, so again, that is our second y, and that is our first y, and that is our first x and our second x, because tables go from top to bottom. So negative 3 minus 4 over 1 minus 0. So that's negative 7 over 1. And we do want to simplify that unless we're actually using it to graph. So negative 7. Okay, so which 2 rows would I use on number 4? The first 2 is what I would use. They're the smallest numbers. And the top row doesn't have a negative. So I obviously want to use that one. So y2, y1, x1, x2. So that is 7 minus 2 over negative 1 minus 0. So that is 5 over a negative 1. So if we simplify that, that is a negative 5. Okay, again, they don't have to be next to each other. So if the easiest 2 things are split up by 2 rows, you can still choose those easiest 2 things. Okay? Just make sure you label them top to bottom. 1, then 2. Okay, now from an equation. We talked about this a lot last class. So what is the slope in number 1? What is our slope? 3/4, because it's always y equals m x plus b. And m is always our slope. So our m is 3/4. But we can't find our m until it's in that format. So it's not just what's next to x. It's what's next to x when in that form. So before we figure out what m is here, we have to solve it to get y by itself. So minus 5x. So y equals negative 5x plus 2. So what is my m this time? Negative 5, because it's whatever's next to x once it's in that y equals mx plus b form. And I'm going a little faster on that part because we did that all last class. Okay, here's another thing we talked about last class, parallel and perpendicular. Anybody remember what is similar about parallel lines? They have the same slope. So they have the same slope, but they have different y-intercepts. If they had the same y-intercept, it'd be the exact same line. That's why I have to decipher that. So they have the same slope and different y-intercepts. Here's a couple examples. Same m, different b. Okay? You don't have to write that word for word if you understand that. You can just write same slope like we did last class. Okay? If you would like to write it exactly as is, that's fine too. So the big calculators, if you click math, a lot of the little ones can do it too. I just don't know the buttons for that. But the big one, if you click math, that's underneath the green, alpha y enter will let you type a fraction, and so it might simplify it as a fraction. But math,
type a fraction without anything else, it'll simplify it.
As a fraction?
Yes.
Okay. But if you have a decimal, then you can click math fraction and it'll turn it into a fraction for you. Same thing, you can turn it to a decimal that way too. All right, last thing is it can be given to you as...
I want to believe it.
And then the sideways one.
All right.
Kind of.
Oh no. I might have to record that one again.